The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to Film Jitsu, the podcast that wields films like deadly weapons. We're your hosts. I am Jay.
And I am Mike.
This week, Mike rides shotgun on a cruise ship that, can't go under 55 miles an hour? I don't know what Speed 2 is all about.
Nobody does.
Well, I let you do all the work by watching it, so I'll never have to. After hearing about how Sandra Bullock and Jason Patric try to explain away the absence of Keanu Reeves for 2 hours, we'll count off our bottom 5 replacements, meaning replacement actors or characters in films that simply don't do the originals justice, and then we'll play a game of Kick 2, Pick 2. But before any of that, strap into your captain's seat and grab the helm and maybe, I don't know, dress well for the captain's dinner, because you're about to go a single set speed. God, I hope this trailer is more exciting than this movie sounds.
It would have to be.
Who's ready to partay on the boat beside me?
Position charges throughout the ship.
Oh, man!
For Annie, there's no changing course.
She's turning us right into the island.
I am never leaving the house again.
No slowing down.
We're gonna cry!
And no getting off. Rush hour hits the water. Speed 2, cruise control.
I just bought a condo here.
Rated PG-13.
Mike, I gave you Speed 2 Cruise Control because I simply never wanted to watch it myself. I was amazed that in the first run of the show that you and your old co-host John never, ever talked about it, saw it, or anything. I don't understand how Speed Cruise Control never came in there. So tell me, how did you guys manage not to cover this one?
I had to go back and check because I was convinced we must have.
Yeah, right.
And so what I have discovered is that maybe now this version of the podcast is in fact Film Jitsu 2 Cruise Control.
That's perfect. What can you say about this, really? I mean, this movie is well known for just about nothing. It kind of went under the radar. It was a very expensive film, from what I know.
It was insanely expensive.
And Jan de Bont, I said his name right for once. And
Nailed it.
Jan de Bont. See, I think I said Jan de Bont just now. Did I say
We're
Jan?
going to get emails. We're going to get emails.
Anyway, Jan de Bont comes back. He was contractually obligated to do so. Keanu Reeves doesn't return. Sandra Bullock does return. Jason Patric and Willem Dafoe jump in the mix. Mm-hmm. What the hell is going on with this movie?
Context, I think, matters. It cannot be understated, going into a conversation about Speed 2 Cruise Control, what an enormous hit the first Speed was.
Mm-hmm.
It was a film that made a lot of money. It was really critically well received and launched a career for Sandra Bullock. And I do think put Keanu Reeves at a whole new level. He had been successful prior to that, but after Speed, it was A-list Keanu, I think, pretty much from there on out.
Yep.
So that's what we were walking into. Everything was lined up. The table had been set. This film should have been a no-brainer success.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, before I talk about my experience with Speed 2 Cruise Control, I should give a little bit of context, because if I'm going to watch Speed 2, I have to have a Starz subscription. And I was like, for Christ's
Jesus,
sake,
really?
Here we are. And so I ended up using a handful of Amazon credits that we had to watch this movie for. I bought a coupon. I used a coupon to watch Speed 2.
Yeah.
And that's how I started this movie. So
was it worth the coupon though?
I wish I had the $2.50 back. I could have used it for something else.
What can you buy for $2.50 nowadays?
I could have bought Not Watching This. So that would have been fine.
You could actually pay for the privilege of never having to watch it. Is it really that bad?
It's not that great, Jason. And it was like nobody saw the first Speed movie. They only kind of heard about it from a buddy. and got a lot of it wrong.
Oh, no.
It looks cheap in a lot of ways, except when it is very obviously lighting money on fire. And we'll talk about that.
Oh, my God.
What we have is Sandra Bullock has a new boyfriend, this police officer.
I'm thinking to myself, another police officer? Really?
Yes, another police officer, really. And so what happened to the first police officer that we all like? Well, the setup of this movie is this police officer is on some wild car chase. The movie starts with a wild car chase.
Okay.
And while he is going on his wild car chase, we find out what Sandra Bullock is up to. She is taking her driver's test because if you remember in the first movie, one of the big important subplots was that she didn't know how to drive.
Right.
Okay, fine. So now she's taking her driver's test. Her driver's ed instructor is comedy legend Tim Conway for no reason.
Holy Jesus. Wow.
So this guy is tearing through the streets of Los Angeles, slamming cars and smashing things. Sandra Bullock is doing the same thing on the other side in her driver's test because she still can't drive. And then they have like an action scene meet cute at the scene when this guy finally slaps the cuffs on the bad guy. And this is where she finds out that her boyfriend is not a Venice Beach bike cop the way she thought, but is in fact a daring special forces police guy, just like Keanu Reeves had been her ex-boyfriend. And she's all upset because she didn't want that. And there's some throwaway nonsense garbage here about how like, that last relationship just didn't work out. And
that's it.
That really is it.
That's it.
Really
That's all you get.
They're kind of like, he was a bad boyfriend and that's it. They took everything about all the chemistry that was built between Keanu and Sandy in that first movie, and all that stuff about how relationships formed under extreme conditions never work out, and they smooth. Well, it never works out, it turns out. Okay.
Sure. That's fine, but the whole premise of the first film is setting that up, right? Isn't it?
Right.
Or do you think that it left it open enough at the end of the first film where it's not a total surprise that they broke up?
I mean, it's not what the first movie had in mind. The first movie wanted us to think that they were going to kiss and go off into the sunset.
Yeah.
We are led to believe at the end of that movie that they are a thing. And in a sequel, they obviously would have been. This is how we start off the film, is finding out that the last relationship didn't work. Now she's pissed off about this relationship because he's a cop just like the ex-boyfriend. And the only way he can make this up to her is by giving her 2 tickets to a cruise. And off they go.
I would think she would be afraid to get on any large moving vehicle with more than 1 or 2 people on it.
There is almost no acknowledgement that the first movie happened beyond them talking. There's even a surprising lack of like, not this again.
Oh my God.
That little bit of back and forth at the beginning of the film before they ever get on the boat is really the majority of the time this film spends acknowledging the events of the first movie.
That's incredible. Wow.
Now what we get on this boat is 20 solid minutes of why I don't ever want to go on a cruise ship. I have no interest in being on a cruise, first off.
Okay.
This should be known about me. None whatsoever. Like, I see what happens on those things. They're just bacteria farms. Sometimes they break down in the middle of the ocean. You got a bunch of people shitting over the side. No, thank you. I don't want to go anywhere where I can't swim back to shore. When the pandemic hit and it was just people floating off the coast in these giant toilets that were no longer working, forget it. So what we have here is like a weird crossover between the characters from Speed and Weekend at Bernie's, because it's just constant shitty white reggae cruise ship music.
Tell me what you tell me, is it true? Do you really love me, girl, like I love you?
It was insufferable for the first 20 minutes of the movie. Then we meet Willem Dafoe, who, I don't know if you know this, Jason, but if a man who looks like Willem Dafoe shows up in your movie, he's definitely the bad guy in your movie, right? There's
no question. I thought you were going to say Willem Dafoe comes in and starts playing the steel drums.
It would have been better.
Oh, no.
I would watch 90 minutes of Willem Dafoe's steel drum extravaganza before watching this movie again. We're introduced to some important characters. We see the silent but sort of tough first mate. We meet the little girl who is deaf. I'm sure that won't have anything to do with the rest of the movie, and we find out that Jason Patric knows sign language. Okay, fine. Huh. We meet Willem Dafoe, who goes back to his cabin and sets up all of this, like, Acme computer stuff. This movie was made in 1997, Jason, and in his little cabin on the ship, he has a box that is labeled in big black letters, fiber optic converter. Which, one, I don't think that means anything.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't.
Two, even if you had one, it wouldn't in like size 36 font on the top say fiber optic converter. Nothing does that.
No.
But this is the kind of nonsense that he's setting up in the cabin. And then pretty much we get a monologue where he explains his entire character motivation to the captain before throwing the captain overboard. His entire motivation is the same essential motivation that Dennis Hopper had in the first movie, which is that he used to work for a company that made the navigation systems for these cruise ships, and they did him dirty, and he's going to show them by taking over the cruise ship with the navigation system. It's like,
right.
He's just another aggrieved former employee, and that's the same thing that Dennis Hopper was in the last movie. So the odds now are that Sandy Bullock has gotten on a form of transportation with a guy who's going to hijack the form of transportation because he's upset at his former employers.
My goodness. The coincidence of all of it. And then they never really mention it.
There would be a point where you think she would be like, this happened to me before. I can't believe this is happening again.
Even John McClane did it. Even John was so charming when he did it, right? In Die Hard 2.
That's exactly right. And here's the thing, Jay. Without a doubt, this movie is just ocean liner Die Hard.
Yeah.
The plot of the film is that we have a tough cop running around this boat trying to stop the bad guy from taking it over. There's even an Argyle character. There isn't an original action set piece in this entire movie, right?
What I really want to know is this, okay? When I think of this movie, I think of Jason Patric as replacing Keanu Reeves. But there's actually another replacement here that you've touched on, and that's Willem Dafoe replacing Dennis Hopper.
Right.
I love both of these actors in these types of roles, you know? Does it work? Does that replacement work or no?
I will say that Willem Dafoe is just unleashed having a good time. His character puts leeches on himself sometimes.
What?
Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. I think he's sick. Maybe it has something to do with the job. It wasn't really clear to me, but Willem Dafoe sitting without his shirt on in this tiny little cabin, covering himself in like his leeches that he talks to with the big crazy face. I was like, okay.
You take care of me, I'll take care of the ship.
Don't tell me that I've never given you anything when I've given you that, Mike. You never would have seen it had I not assigned this movie to you.
That's exactly right. But Dennis Hopper was scary in that first movie.
Yeah. Oh, no, he was. Yeah.
He was a frightening guy. And in this one, he's just wild.
So as a replacement goes for character to character, it's more the script, not necessarily the actor.
Absolutely. Yeah. Willem Dafoe is almost like this tech guy. So he's running around with what is essentially a Nintendo Power Glove that he is controlling this cruise ship with.
Oh, my God.
As he's running away from Jason Patric and he goes through the door and he beep boop boops his power glove and the door closes. And so he's got control of the ship and the navigation. And he's going to crash the ship into a goddamn oil tanker. And then he's going to crash the ship right into the beach. And he's just going to crash the ship. That's the whole plan. And I think there's a shitload of jewelry on there. So again, we're back to Die Hard, that the whole thing was sort of like a cover for a heist.
This sounds like it was a Die Hard script that got thrown over. Like, so Die Hard with a Vengeance, the third Die Hard movie, apparently was actually a Lethal Weapon movie. It started out that way. It sounds like Cruise Control here, which I can't just keep saying Speed 2 Cruise Control. Like, it's just too much.
I'm going to keep saying it the whole time. I have to confess to being a little embarrassed by how long it took me to realize that Cruise Control was both the setting of a constant speed and also it was a cruise. They doubled their entendre and I sort of missed
They tripled it, right? Because he's controlling the cruise.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it turns out.
it's cruise control, the car thing, the speed, then it's cruise
Right.
with the cruise ship, but then it's control with the, it's like all this. They really were on top of their game here. But I do think that it was a Die Hard movie based on everything you've told me. And they decided, no, just put Sandra Bullock in it. And from what I heard, she's not really in it much.
What happens, unfortunately, is that while in Speed, Keanu and Sandra Bullock were trapped together on the bus, in this movie, they're off having their own side adventures. She's always running to do one thing, and he's going to stop the other thing. And then I'll meet you at the they're doing a lot of that. So they're almost having their own individual adventures on this
It's the
ship.
same as the beginning that you described. Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
This sounds like a rough watch. How did this one rank amongst all the ones that you've seen here for Film Jitsu? Where's this one land? Like,
This is conceivably dumb fun. It wasn't painful to watch. And the reason that it wasn't painful to watch is there are a lot of things in here that are just eye popcorn. So Jan de Bont is really, really good at spending money.
oh, I thought you were
And
going to
then-
say he's really good at camera work. No.
Jan de Bont does spectacle, and that's hard to do in a lot of scenes where you're inside a boat that is filling with water or about to crash or whatever. But we do get so many of those insane Jan de Bont action sequences over the course of this movie, like the time that Jason Patric has to try to go under the ship and throw a giant chain into the propellers to slow it down.
Oh, come on.
Oh, yeah, Jason. I don't know if you've ever tied a rope around your waist and gone 25 feet from the propellers of a cruise ship to try and gum them up with a chain and live to tell the tale. But Jason Patric's character sure has done that. And
My
that
goodness.
is one of a million insane set pieces that this movie has that should be it's like the opening to a James Bond movie happening again and again and again.
That doesn't sound that
again.
bad. That doesn't sound bad to me.
It is bad, but it is fun. And this culminates in a scene where the final act that this guy's going to have, this villain, is he's going to just crash the ocean liner right into the pier. And so what we get as the ship is barreling down on it and our characters are trying to find ways to slow down the ship so that it won't explode or whatever they're doing. And we see this entire little seaside town having fun, eating ice cream. The seagulls are flying around. The kids are having a good time. And you look out the window and the ocean liner's coming right at you. And then, for what I think might have been 10 human minutes, this ocean liner crashes into the pier and plows through this town. Just right through the middle of a town.
This sounds fantastic. I should have watched this.
It's all practical effect. So we're
Wow.
not getting a whole lot of CGI. What Jan de Bont did was built a town at the cost of building a town,
Oh, my God.
but constructed rails underneath this town so that he could drive a cruise ship through it. And the fun
Jesus.
part is you're watching all of this stuff get destroyed, right? Just buildings crumbling and wood cracking, but they built it for the movie. So everything that's breaking looks kind of brand new. Like when they cracked the house apart, you're like, the inside of that house looked real new.
Nobody hasn't just junk and unfolded laundry
That's
everywhere.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. But it just keeps going through. You're like, okay, the ship's got to stop now, right? It's gone through half a town, and the ship's like, got more town, and it just keeps on going. And then when it finally comes to a stop, and Jason, I wish I was kidding you, it comes to a stop. It's barreling down on a church with a steeple.
Oh, no.
And
No,
a
no.
bell in the steeple, and it pulls right
Inches
up to
right to the bell.
and goes ding. It
Come
dings
on.
the bell. It dings the church bell, Jason. That's what happens in this movie. And you would think, well, certainly at this point the movie is over. No, it is not.
Oh, my
Because
God.
Willem Dafoe is now trying to get away on a plane. Now he's got Sandra Bullock in the plane. Jason Patric now has to hop into the plane to wrestle Willem Dafoe out of the plane. Sandy and Jason Patric fall into the ocean. It's bananas. The whole thing is bananas.
So it's really Speed 2 Cruise Control and Speed 3.
It just doesn't quit. And you said that this sounds like a rejected script from the Die Hard franchise. I actually think, really, having seen the film, it is more like a very rough draft of the first film. This isn't like another adventure. Like, the plot as it's playing out in this movie is like a ripoff of the original Die Hard. So many of those elements are there that it's not like this was the next story. It was like somebody retelling the story and changing the details.
Yeah.
And it was so sort of brazen and crass that way that, again, it was hard to enjoy the movie. Like, the movie wanted me to think I was watching a Die Hard by wearing a Die Hard costume. And I just wasn't having it. This should have been fun. But you could tell that Sandra Bullock did not want to be there. You could tell that Willem Dafoe was just going to turn the whole thing into a goddamn goof. Like, he didn't want to be there either. So he was like, I'm going to be unhinged. The entire film was a colossal failure.
Yeah.
Just a huge financial loss. And wisely, I think, that was the end of the franchise. You don't make this movie without Keanu Reeves. You just don't do it. And it's honestly a surprise to me that Sandra Bullock's career survived the film. Because at this point, she was just breaking into the big time after Speed.
I think she did The Net after Speed, right? And that was a pretty big hit.
Yep.
And then, of course, she just kept going and going and going. And she ended up making some really great stuff over the years here and there. But this one didn't sink her.
No, and a little unbelievably that it didn't. I would say that it sunk Jason Patric, but I've never really believed that Jason Patric had his head above water anyway. Not a big Jason Patric guy. You could also tell that he didn't want to be there.
Well, I believe they were friends. That was really how he got into this. Was that Sandra Bullock had to do it and she wanted to bring a friend in so that they would be able to do it together. I think what the producers probably thought was that what they had done with Keanu Reeves, Patric was sort of bubbling under. He had made some good films. He was recognizable. Maybe this could do the same thing that it did with Keanu Reeves, and it just didn't. As it turns out, Jason Patric really is not a great replacement for Keanu Reeves.
They got overconfident in making a sequel. I think they thought the first movie was such a smash success that the second movie was just going to clean up. And so they didn't try real hard to make a good movie, even in the director, because Jan de Bont was in a little bit of a season here. He had made Speed in 94, followed it up by Twister in 96, which... Hey, look, if you're Mike Merrigan, those are two all-time favorite action movies of mine. You know that. We've talked about Twister before. I think, spoiler alert, you and I are going to go see Twister for the show later this summer.
Twisters, yes, that's right.
That's right.
The reboot of the franchise that no one asked for.
Coming soon to a Film Jitsu feed near you. So after having made Speed and Twister, I think they were like, well, Cruise Control is going to clean house. Of course it is. And that was the end of it for Jan de Bont, because after Speed 2... He made The Haunting and then that Lara Croft Tomb Raider movie.
Oh,
so,
Jesus.
Right. Yeah, that was the end of it. I guess it was sort of the perfect movie for you to pick for this time of year. It's a really dumb summer action movie if you're Film Jitsu. It's not a good movie, but for what we do and for this time of year, I don't know that I could ask for anything better.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Mike, in thinking about Speed 2, as I said during the main review, I immediately think of Jason Patric replacing Keanu Reeves and what that means to the film. It's probably why it was a mega bomb.
It definitely is. It's definitely... I know we just did the main review, but that's definitely the reason. Yeah.
So... if that's the case, I think that the bottom 5 here was very well chosen. Now, I know I gave a little bit more leeway and latitude with this than just saying a character replacing another character or an actor just replacing. It can be any variation of this, because it wasn't Jason Patric playing the same role as Keanu Reeves, which there is a lot of that out there. And so
Yep.
we could talk about that. We can talk about characters assuming the same roles, or we can talk about actors replacing other actors, sort of. I'm wondering what your approach was here, because there were a lot of options, replacements.
There were, and I found this to be a little bit tough when I sat down to think about it, because there were a couple that jumped out right away. But really, when I got thinking about it, I wanted to put some rules in place for me. You know, that's part of what I do. And so I opted not to consider any long-running kind of legacy characters.
Yeah.
So my list doesn't have any James Bond. It doesn't have any Superman. It doesn't have any Batman. Where the character was conceived to be played by a lot of people over a long time. Batman doesn't get older. We just get a different Batman, right? And so I left those out, and that made it a little bit harder. Some characters exist to be played over and over again, and I didn't want to hold that against anybody. It's not fair that Brandon Routh isn't Christopher Reeve.
This is a neat inversion of our bottom 5 franchises, where we had a rule where it had to be 3 movies, at least 3 movies to be a franchise. Here we're inverting that and saying, we didn't really want to talk about franchises. I mostly did the same thing, but with one exception.
I did have, at the end of the day, maybe a more conventional list.
Oh, interesting.
So that was how I went into it, but I'm a lot more interested in hearing your number 5.
Sure. Yeah. My number 5 is an odd choice on my list, and it is Back to the Future 2. Now, I originally thought of this one because of Claudia Wells being replaced by Elizabeth Shue as Marty McFly's girlfriend. But then I remembered how Crispin Glover opted out of the sequel when he decided after the first movie that he really didn't like its ending. How we only view present-day George McFly as successful, but it's also rumored that he asked for too much money and that Zemeckis and co-producer Bob Gale said he wasn't worth it. So either way, he was replaced in a fashion by Jeffrey Weissman, who was buried under prosthetics. So rather than rewrite the movie, Zemeckis thought they could use special effects to get around the problem. I would think that we both agree that this is an increasingly common assumption from that filmmaker, for sure.
Yeah, right.
I feel like Zemeckis alone created the, quote, uncanny valley with weird choices like this one.
You're so right. You are so right.
But look, regardless, Glover felt it was unfair that his likeness and personality were being used without his consent, and he sued the producers. And because of this, there are now clauses in the Screen Actors Guild bargaining agreements that protect artists from having their image used as special effects. And now deep fakes and AI, as all of this gets more convincing. This replacement both detracts from the film because those sequences with George are distracting, but it also set an enormously important precedent that is even more important today than it was when the movie came out.
It's a fantastic pick. In fact, it's such a good pick, we might talk about it in a little while.
Oh, shit. The same one? The same guy and everything? Or Claudia Wells?
As a matter of fact, Santo, you fucked me so hard by making this your pick, because I have this on my list.
You drop it into mine in the middle when I talk about Weissman.
No, because yours was so much better than my fucking shtick. You're like, let me explain everything. Like, and I was just like, that guy doesn't look like Crispin Glover. That's stupid.
Oh, God, this could be great. With that, all that said about Back to the Future 2, what is your number 5, Mike?
My number 5's here because I think it's going to be a wildly unpopular pick.
Ooh.
And because it has a little bit of an asterisk. It's my only superhero pick in the bunch, and I really did try hard to steer clear of those. But my pick here is Mark Ruffalo replacing Edward Norton, specifically as Bruce Banner in the MCU. Yeah, I really like Norton as Bruce Banner. That standalone Hulk movie is not great, but I like Norton as Bruce Banner. And I think, for me, he brought a kind of pathos to the character that Ruffalo just doesn't.
He has none of that. Bill Bixby in the original show was all that. And I think that was what Norton was kind of referring back to. But Ruffalo's like very charming and charismatic. He's a little bit doofy.
And he's great in his own way. The Hulk technology, of course, we can't even compare those because the effects of Hulk and Ruffalo as Hulk in the MCU movies is light years ahead of that standalone Hulk movie. But That's not what I'm talking about. I think that Mark Ruffalo is really great as the Hulk. And especially in that hybrid version of Hulk where he's Banner but Hulk at the same time. But when it comes to just being Bruce Banner, I really liked that melancholy pathos that Ed Norton brought to the flick. That just worked better for me, and I was sorry to have seen him out of the franchise so quickly. Again, I think I'm going to get a lot of shit for that. I know people love Mark Ruffalo, and they're going to think I'm saying I don't think he's great, and I know how beloved he is in those movies. I think so too, but I just preferred Edward Norton.
Well, my number 4 is Smokey and the Bandit 3. Now, Jerry Reed taking over for Burt Reynolds. Like, Jackie Gleason was collecting a paycheck here, reprising Buford T. Justice as he chases this, quote, fake bandit across the South. This movie is abysmal and was made only to cash in on what Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, and Gleason had built in the first 2 movies. Here, country singer Jerry Reed, supporting character Cletus Snowman Snow from the first 2 movies, he acts as a sort of proxy for Reynolds' bandit, who's off somewhere haranguing Sally Field about...
When do we get started?
When do we get started?
That's my line.
When do we get started?
That's my line. You say whenever you like.
Whenever you like. So I keep it rolling. This is good stuff.
Yeah, I like this.
Jerry Reed is an amiable enough guy, and he wrote and performed Smokey and Bandit's theme.
He's bound and down, loaded up and trucking. Are we gonna do what they say can't be done?
I will say Reed is amiable, but he's not roguish. Like, he's not charming. Yeah. He's a little too blonde. He's too country, and he's kind of old at this point because he was starting to show signs of wear from a pretty serious cigarette habit that he had that would ultimately lead to his death in 2008. So, yeah, a bad choice to fill the shoes of the man, Burt Reynolds. And the script didn't do anyone any favors either. But what I find most funny about this is that when I came up with bottom 5 replacements, Smokey and the Bandit 3 jumped into my head.
What is your thing lately? The other day you were picking on Cannonball Run. Now it's Smokey and the... Like,
I don't know.
What about weird... driving cars pisses you off?
I don't know. But what's funny is I had to look it up because I wasn't sure it was a real movie. And when I started typing Smokey and the Bandit 3, the auto suggestion from Google was, is Smokey and the Bandit 3 a real movie? So it's not just me.
It's the internet. Yeah.
Was there a Smokey and the Bandit 3? I say no, there was not. So
if you want to write in to Mike at filmjitsu.net or Jay at filmjitsu.net and let us know whether or not there was a Smokey and the Bandit 3, we would love to hear from you.
Or if you happen to have made Smokey and the Bandit 4.
I hope that Smokey and the Bandit 4 does exist for reasons that you might find out more about later.
Oh.
My number 4, Jay, well, you kind of already did the legwork for me there because, you know what's weird? Replacing Crispin Glover with a dude that doesn't even look like Crispin Glover. Of course, you said it great. It's my number 4. Jeffrey Weissman taking over for Crispin Glover. And he was such an important part of that first Back to the Future movie that Glover's non-participation screwing up the script even. I mean, they had to make pretty big rewrites about why George McFly wasn't around. It changed the entire movie and just nothing about it worked. It was distracting. It was dumb. And so it jumped out at me. That was almost the first thing I thought of when you gave me the topic. Even when I was a kid, I was like, that's not the guy. Even when I was young, I was like, that's not the guy. Do they think I'm stupid?
So it didn't occur to you first about Claudia Wells being replaced by Elizabeth Shue? Because for me, when I was a kid and I saw these movies, and I love them, like, let me be real clear. I love Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
All of them. The second one, when they introduced the girlfriend, it felt so jarring. It was such a big change. Her hair didn't look real. It looked fake almost. I don't know. There was something very Aquanet about it that I threw me off.
It was okay for me because it was so different. It was the way that they were it was the fake nose. It was the whole thing. They took a guy that
with him,
nothing like him and tried to make him look like it was weird. It didn't work. It bothered me maybe a little bit more than it bothered you, but I would love to hear maybe what you have for your number 3.
My number 3 is from The Sum of All Fears from 2002. It's my one entry on my list that kind of falls into the franchise territory. But let's just say it. Ben Affleck taking over for Harrison Ford, who had taken over for Alec Baldwin. None of these movies are that bad. And some of them are great, actually.
You're right.
Baldwin was an outstanding Jack Ryan in Hunt for Red October, while Ford he brought like an older, wiser, grumpier version. And then Affleck comes along and he's the dumb one. He was naive. He didn't know anything. He was scared. He was nervous. And he just looked ridiculous. He looked out of place.
And as much as you may or may not like Ben Affleck, it was an obvious downgrade in talent.
Yeah.
If you're going to follow in the shoes of Harrison Ford, you better not be Ben Affleck.
I know. I mean, replacing a character made famous by Harrison Ford, that's like having someone like Alden Ehrenreich play Han Solo or something.
You weren't wrong when you said it. You were right then and you're right now. Yeah. When you're right, you're right.
Affleck just didn't look right acting opposite Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
It just didn't.
It seemed like Bring Your Ben Affleck to Work Day.
Yes.
He doesn't really work here, but come see what Dad does all day, that kind of thing.
It really had those vibes. So it's just the kind of thing you don't expect to see Shannon Hamilton, the proprietor of Fashionable Mail, as a CIA agent that's going to save the world. So.
And again, though, like a weird trend all of a sudden in our list, I like Ben Affleck. Just like I like Mark Ruffalo. It's just some shit doesn't make sense.
Everybody loves Jerry Reed.
That's well, my number 3, I guess speaking about somebody that everybody does kind of love, I almost hate to mention the film from my number 3 because I've really been considering doing a whole episode on it. And I don't know if I want to let it out of the bag. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe it's not right. Anyway,
risky move.
I'm going to roll with it and see what you think, if maybe it would make a good episode somewhere down the line or not. My number 3 is Fairuza Balk replacing Judy Garland as Dorothy in The Return to Oz. This is a profoundly weird movie. It's honestly creepy as fuck. And a lot of kids in the 80s were messed up.
Yeah, I
something
agree.
fierce by this flick.
Yep.
And I have an affection for it. But it's safe to say that Fairuza Balk is no Judy Garland.
You're just a thing with a gump's head on it. We built you and brought you to life so that you could take us to the Gnome King to rescue the Scarecrow.
I may not last very long. I don't feel too well put together.
Gone were the musical numbers that made Garland a star. Gone was the innocent girl from Kansas. And what we got was a pretty friggin' weird kid with a messed up noggin who just looks terrified the entire time because everything happening around her is nightmare fuel. And I guess that was the point. That was the story they were telling. Like, she was doing what was asked of her. She wasn't doing a bad job. It was just so weird in comparison to the original. And I don't know, maybe it was just because of how bad it messed me up, but replacing Judy Garland with Fairuza Balk, I don't know. I think this hits me in a very primal place.
No, it does. And it's funny because, as we've mentioned before, I'm not a huge fan of Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
But when this came out, I couldn't get excited about it because she looked so different. It didn't feel like it was part of that same universe.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they would go in such a offshoot direction. When it came to Wizard of Oz and Return to Oz, it looked and felt so different that I completely agree with you. On a gut level, it doesn't feel right. So this is a great pick, honestly. No disrespect to Fairuza Balk at all. But.
What a dark choice to take away from The Wizard of Oz. Like, what part of that story do you want to take away with you? And somebody was like, oh, the part where that girl, when she wakes up, is definitely insane and they commit her to an insane asylum and try shock therapy. That's definitely what we're going to go with. Oh, okay, weirdo.
Okay.
But that's what they ran with. And because it fits in maybe better with like a Henson vibe
For
at
sure.
the time. One of those dark Jim Henson movies.
Yeah, like Dark Crystal Labyrinth. Yeah.
It's really just such a departure from a movie that you and I split on because I love The Wizard of Oz. I often cite that as one of the movies that made me realize that movies were movies. And so it was such a departure from that in a way that was upsetting to me as a young person that it had to be on my list at number 3.
Great choice. Great choice. Well, my number 2 on our list of replacements is a very recent one, so this is a little gimmicky, but it is Garfield the movie from 2024, which I had to take my son to go see. Chris Pratt replacing Bill Murray as the voice.
True?
Yes, as the voice of Garfield. Chris Pratt is the voice of Garfield in this new film. We could talk a little bit about how Murray replaced Lorenzo Music, who did the voice of Garfield on a TV show that ran in the early 2000s, a CG TV show.
Yeah.
Lorenzo Music, interestingly, was a voice actor for tons of cartoons and such. He did the voice for Peter Venkman on The Real Ghostbusters.
Wow.
Of course, played by Bill Murray. So apparently Bill Murray's good for the marquee. Lorenzo Music's good for the television. That's how it worked out. Chris Pratt just doesn't work. He's with an edge rather than having that been there, done that, which kind of defines Garfield, that kind of lazy, lackadaisical way of just going through things that even
like
when...
how cats are assholes? Yeah, cats are assholes. Garfield was an asshole. Cats don't care that you're there. Cats don't care what you think. Neither does Garfield.
It just doesn't fit. And I don't think that the film needed a particularly heart-wrecking early segment with Garfield and his origin story of how he's found by John and everything. It's just ludicrous. The whole story for this one was about like a deadbeat dad that's voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. We could get into that whole thing, but anyway.
Was this a situation where Garfield watched the first Garfield movie and then went insane and they committed him to an insane asylum and gave him electroshock therapy? Is that what happened? Is that what this one's about?
All while they were in a cruise ship that was being controlled by Willem Dafoe.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to see that Garfield movie, any Garfield movie. That's too bad for you. My number 2 is here because I think the whole thing is kind of cringy. And am I too old to use words like cringy? Yes, probably. But in this case, I think it's fair. My number 2 is the replacement of a recently deceased Heath Ledger with a menagerie of other actors in the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus.
Oh, Terry Gilliam, yeah.
Yeah, when Ledger died, they should have had the good sense to pack it up and go home.
Mm-hmm.
Call it good, but I think they were fairly well into the film. Just say, hey, look, boys, that good try, shut it down. Instead, Gilliam reworks the entire movie so that a combination of Jude Law, Johnny Depp, and Colin Farrell could play the character. It just cast a pall over the entire film and was insanely distracting because any time you saw Jude Law, Johnny Depp, or Colin Farrell, it might as well have been somebody coming up to a microphone and being like, do you remember that Heath Ledger died? Here's your reminder.
God.
And so that's what, just because everybody knew the story, you knew why they were in the movie. So every time they were there, it was like a reminder that Heath Ledger had just tragically died. So I think it was just tacky and foolish to try and move forward with the movie after Ledger's passing. So that was my number 2.
Well, it's Gilliam, and we all know about his Don Quixote, which he ended up actually making after time, but he never ever gave up on it, which is insane considering everything that he went through. So the guy is determined, if nothing else. Well, it's a solid pick at number 2 for you. My number 1, I have a feeling that we might have the same number 1. I'm a little nervous. Oh, is it really?
I will bet you my house.
Oh, okay. Well, then, all right. Then I feel much better then. My number 1, again, kind of sort of a franchise, but there were only 2 movies with this character, and that's Clarice Starling as she was portrayed in Hannibal 2001. So
you can have my whole house.
I did it.
No, it's not. No, you didn't.
Oh, you son of a gun.
But it's a good pick that I did think about. There just wasn't going to be a world in which I got upset about watching Julianne Moore in a movie, even though everything you're about to say is correct.
This raid was an ugly mess. I ended up in a position where I had a choice of dying or shooting a woman carrying a child. I chose. I shot her. I killed a mother holding her child. And I regret it. I resent myself for it.
You can't say anything bad about Maude Lebowski, and I get that. The problem is that the Academy Award-winning turn by Jodie Foster was this balance of strength, courage, smarts, and vulnerability that was all written expertly into a taut, wonderful thriller with supreme acting by Hopkins as well. I mean, the interplay between those two characters is so phenomenal. You know, we grew up at a time when this movie cleared house at the Oscars, right? One of the few films to ever win all the major awards. We grew up at the same time as things like Nirvana. They break out onto the scene and change everything, right? These things were game changers in entertainment. And then they try to follow them up. With Nirvana, it was all these other bands that never quite were as good, right? There's this movie that stands so far head and shoulders above. Thomas Harris writes a novel, 7 years later? Everybody's been waiting for a sequel. What happens? Demi reads it and says, well, I can't do this. This is too grotesque.
Right.
I think more diplomatically, Foster says that she didn't do it because she was working on a different film that she was directing.
That's right. That never got made.
Yeah, right. So that's interesting. But I think she came out later on and said that she didn't understand what the character was doing in it. And so it ended up with Ridley Scott. Great. I remember this famous quote that Dino De Laurentiis, again, I know, but hey, you can't have a movie podcast about bad movies and not talk about Dino a lot. But Dino De Laurentiis has his great quote where he was talking about Jonathan Demme not coming back for this next movie. And he says, when the Pope dies, you get a new Pope. So he hires Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott comes in, he brings in Julianne Moore. Like you, I love Julianne Moore. I think she's absolutely fantastic. There's something in this movie where it seems as though she can't get into the skin. And this is an odd choice of words here, but she can't seem to access this role. And I think the big piece of it was that Foster was this person.
Yeah, it was unforgivably stupid to try and make a movie without the principal cast of the first film. You know that I think Silence of the Lambs is very nearly a perfect movie.
Yeah.
And if Silence of the Lambs had never been made and this movie was just the only movie, I don't think anybody'd complain about it. It would be a perfectly acceptable thriller.
For sure.
But in the shadow of what I think is a flawless film, why would you even try this?
Yeah.
And so I thought a lot about it. I considered it for my list. I sort of gave myself the out because I just don't want to ever say anything bad about Julianne Moore. So I moved away from it.
That's fair. Yep.
And what it gives me instead is a number one that's not bad at all, really. But it's so bonkers that I had to include it. It's intentionally stupid, and that kind of effort is worth a bottom 5 because it tried so hard to be a bottom 5. Jay, you know that I love the movie Wet Hot American Summer.
Yeah.
Of course, A-lister Bradley Cooper's in that movie before he became a great big deal. But to Bradley Cooper's credit, he's played along in some of the subsequent projects, the Wet Hot side hustle.
Crew from the State. Yeah.
Right. And they have made a couple of mini series and extensions of the Wet Hot American Summer story. Well, in Wet Hot 10 years later, the series, the 6-part series, they weren't able to get Bradley Cooper that time. So to work around it, the gag was that he was played by actor Adam Scott, who played the same character, but they said that he had a nose job to fix a deviated septum to obviously make fun of the fact that he wasn't Bradley Cooper. It was so funny. It was such a funny way to handle that thing that I was like,
that is good.
How could that not be the number one on a bottom 5 replacements list? That's what it wanted to be.
That's a great ironic pick, and I think that's a perfect way to wrap up the list. Well done. Well done.
It's thumbing its nose at the entire idea of replacing an actor with another actor.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember watching it and thinking to myself, I didn't realize that was his character. I just didn't understand what this gag was. So now I feel like you've explained it to me. I was not awake, I think, when I was watching it either. So good stuff. That's a great pick. Mike, recently I feel as though we've sort of stuck to the theme of the show with our Kick 2 Pick 2. We didn't start out that way. We started out pretty random with our Kick 2 Pick 2s, and now we seem to be getting, I don't know, cheeky with them and whatever. I am continuing that trend. It didn't go totally random. I almost did. And then I realized there is an ideal Kick 2 Pick 2 sitting in this episode. The elephant in Speed 2 Cruise Control's cruise ship is Keanu Reeves. So therefore, our Kick 2 Pick 2 is Keanu Reeves' movies. I'm going to give you 4 Keanu Reeves. You can only keep 2. What's it going to be? You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The Matrix, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Point Break, or Speed.
Can I ask why Bill
Bogus
and Ted's
Journey and
Bogus
not...
Journey?
It's because William Sadler plays Death in the Bogus Journey movie, and he's fucking spectacular.
Right, he
and
is
so I would have a really, really hard time kicking that to the curb. What about Point Break for you?
I love Point Break.
See, I fucking knew you would. I don't care for it.
Why not? What's not to love?
I don't like it. It was just too grab-assy. It wasn't my thing at all.
What does that mean?
I don't know, man. It just seemed like a lot of bros hanging out, talking about how macho and zen they are. It just wasn't my thing.
Do you have any idea how insane Gary Busey is?
Yeah, but I can watch Hider in the House anytime.
The Buse is loose in this movie, and I don't know. Everything about this movie is just like exactly what I want out of a dumb, fun action movie.
Yeah, but you can't keep it with these 4 movies, can you? No way.
I think I can't.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no way.
It pains me a little bit to take a Catherine Bigelow movie out of the list, but I might be like real fast knowing which 2 these are for me. Where are you at?
Yep, real fast for me too, I think. Maybe not. This is a little bit harder for me. Point Break is an easy out for me. The Matrix is a revolutionary film that I don't think there's been too many movie-going experiences that I've had that really blew the back of my head off. And so Speed, we haven't really talked about Speed, which is the whole reason that this particular episode exists. Speed is a truly wonderful thriller. It's exciting. You said it earlier. Dennis Hopper is actually scary. Jeff Daniels, that expression on his face. I think the expression before Jeff Daniels is blown up might be the reason that I can't kick Speed.
Right.
And I think that trumps William Sadler as Death. I think the obvious 2 are the 2 for me. It's The Matrix and Speed. Where are you at?
It's The Matrix and Speed. As a matter of fact, it is so obviously The Matrix and Speed.
Yeah.
Just so obviously. For you, for me, I'm going to say everybody for listening at home, I'm going to throw an audible at you. Brand new Keanu Reeves, Pick 2, Kick 2. What are you going to do if I give you John Wick, The Replacements, The Devil's Advocate, and My Own Private Idaho?
You dick. I know the 2. I know the 2, and it's actually...
you love The Replacements.
I don't like, and I don't like John Wick. I don't like any of them. So it's actually easy for me. It's The Replacements and The Devil's Advocate. I love The Devil's Advocate. I love that movie. So
again, correct answer. So here we go. Next round. What is going to be your Pick 2, Kick 2 between Johnny Mnemonic, Hope Floats, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and why don't we go with, I don't know, Knock Knock?
It's a tougher one. That's a tough one. Well, Bram Stoker's Dracula I actually quite like. So that's the one keep. Johnny Mnemonic. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Johnny Mnemonic and...
Nope. Oh, man. We were on a roll. You know what? I was going to keep this going as long as we landed on the 2 objectively correct answers. And you just picked Johnny Mnemonic. So this game is done.
No, Johnny Mnemonic's not as bad. Did you ever see the black and white version?
Why would I do that?
Come on. It's not that bad a flick.
Well, I'm glad you told me because it's fucking terrible. And I thought for sure that we were going to do a full episode on it. And I just found out it's your favorite movie. So
I like how anytime I say something's good, you're like, it's your favorite movie.
That's because you hate everything. So if you like it, it has to be the other opposite side of the coin. No. Okay, so I'm keeping
Oh, the
Hope
one that
Floats.
Dracula made sense.
Dracula, and I'm keeping Hope Floats, and let me tell you why.
Okay.
One of the greatest jokes I ever heard will live in my heart, and I hope this is the last thing I think about before I die, because I will laugh so hard that I'll go off on a high note. Many years ago, I'm at my best friend's parents' house. His father, one of my favorite humans on planet Earth, right? His wife yells up to him, "Bob, let's watch Hope Floats." And Bob says, "Sue, shit floats too, but I'm not going to watch that." and I could not throw a movie that spawned that moment in my life into the Phantom Zone, so it would have to be Hope Floats.
Awesome choice on a technicality, though. Awesome stuff.
What did we end up doing? We did like a pick 12, keep 6? Nice.
Nice. Mike, it's your favorite part of the show.
It is my favorite part of the show.
Where you get to get back at me for making you watch Speed 2. So I ask you, what am I doing next Saturday night?
You're right. This really is kind of the best part of the show, isn't it? Well, we've had this great thing going on where we're in the middle of the summer, and I've been trying to keep to kind of a summertime vibe, and I think Blood Beach and Speed 2 Cruise Control, it's been going good so far. Why would I ruin a good thing? And if I think about one of the greatest summer movies of all time, if I want to stay in that lane, then I think, of course, our next episode has to be where you review the film Jaws.
No, you liar.
Yeah,
there's no
Jaws.
way I'm going to...
Jaws.
Like
Jaws
Cruel Jaws. Jaws.
Jaws. Oh, wait, hold on. It says here in my notes, Jaws the Revenge. Yeah, that's right. You're watching Jaws the Revenge.
With Michael
Jaws
Caine,
4.
Mario
Of course
Van
you are,
Peebles.
yes.
Oh, God.
You're going to watch Jaws the Revenge.
You can't be serious. Oh, my God, no. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this to our listeners. Oh, God.
We're doing it. Jaws the Revenge. The one with, I think, psychic stuff, maybe. I'm not sure.
This time it's personal was the tagline for the movie. I saw this in the theater when it came out.
Wow. In 1987, huh?
Yeah. I was a movie-going lad at that point.
I was 5.
I was 12, so, it was leagues older than you at that point. And Jaws 4 is an absolutely awful movie. I have no idea what I'm going to say about it. Great choice, Mike. I mean, it's summary.
That's right. And so
man,
we're going back to the beach, baby.
I thought for a bit you were going to give me From Justin to Kelly, and I was pretty worried about it. So
don't worry, it's on the short list, but not next week. Next week you're going to review Jaws the Revenge and our bottom 5. You sort of accidentally landed on this earlier in the episode. We're going to do bottom 5 fourth installments.
Oh, jeez.
This is the fourth film in what turns out, you don't think of Jaws as a franchise, right? I don't think most people do. When you mention Jaws, nobody even really thinks about the other films.
No,
like
not
they
really.
never even happened.
Yeah.
Well, this is in fact the fourth in a franchise, and so that's what we're going to do.
Oh, we're going to have the same movies picked. My guess is both of us, the bottom 5 matches.
Do we want to set any ground rules now to prevent such a thing?
You don't get to do horror.
Okay. And you don't get to do comic book movie.
Okay, that's fine. All right, awesome.
Okay, great. I love it.
All right, that's a great bottom 5. That's a great choice. I don't know what I'm going to do with Jaws the Revenge. I'm going to have to think long and hard about it in the 48 years it's going to take me to finish that film. But until then, we have been your hosts. I am Jay.
And I am Mike.
We'll see you next time.
Stalno mislim na te, hoću znat sve kate, vježbat ću sate i sate. Karate, vježbat ću dok zadnji mi kjaj zostane izađe.
Do you want to hear the totally fucking unhinged version of film Jitsu? Because Santa's on happy pills. Santa's on happy pills and Merrigan's high as fuck, and this is what you get.